Hey folks, David Stewart here. I just saw a bit of news, and that is that Amazon has canceled a Lord of the Rings MMO that was in development, at least early development. They announced it back in 2023, and they're canceling it. And all I can say is, thank God. Every time Amazon announces that they're canceling something, especially something to do with the Tolkien universe, it just feels like a relief. It just feels like you dodge a bullet. Anytime anybody cancels something with Lord of the Rings, I feel like there's a relief from that cancellation. Now, they said they're still moving ahead with some other kind of game that may be set in Middle-earth, but they're canceling an MMO. Why am I relieved about that? Well, what's your confidence in a large corporation like Amazon doing anything with Lord of the Rings justice? Considering Rings of Power, which I refuse to watch, and I don't know a single person who thought it was good that actually bothered to watch it or could even really sit through it. Just eviscerating the lore. Brown M&M test failed right from the get-go. No reason to watch it. But from that company, what's your confidence level that they're going to do? They're going to do it justice? It's pretty low. Even that they're going to do something that's quality, if it weren't somehow Lord of the Rings, it's going to be pretty low. And then the other side of this is MMOs, right? Now, there is a Lord of the Rings MMO that's still going. It's been going on for almost 20 years now and has been popular at different points. I've actually never played it. If you've played it, leave me a comment. Let me know. Did you like the Lord of the Rings online MMO? I used to play WoW and other games with people that had played Lord of the Rings online, and they really liked it. At one point, you could buy like a lifetime membership. Like you pay a lump sum, and I don't remember how much it was, but it was a lot of money, and you could play that game for life. And we were always like, I can't believe someone would buy a lifetime subscription, and that's just what, you're flushing money down the toilet. What if they stop updating it? Well, I think the people who did that kind of came out ahead, because 20 years later, they could still just drop in and play the game anytime they want to, presuming that they still are honoring those lifetime subscriptions, which who knows if they are or they aren't. But you could go and you could play that. That's an old school MMO, so chances are that's going to be a better experience than an MMO that's going to be developed today. So the other half of this really is that MMOs suck. The MMOs haven't been good for a long time, and the reason they haven't been good for a long time is the modern approach to game design. Massively multiplayer online role-playing games, when they originally came out, we're talking like Ultima Online, maybe first, second generation of those games. Really, first generations like Mud, multi-user dungeon, played with ASCII characters. That's like ancient proto game. Ultima Online, or maybe the original Lineage, which I don't know anyone who's played the original Lineage. I think it was already offline by the time I even cared about playing it. EverQuest 2 kind of fits in that next generation of like World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, Lord of the Rings Online. I think that was the sweet spot for MMOs, where EverQuest was had a lot of barriers to get into the game. It wasn't a game that was built around ease for the player. In fact, it's the opposite. There's a lot of I can call it friction, but there are a lot of challenges for the player that the player has to overcome with other players. That's the entire point of the game. And so EverQuest provided a really deep and fulfilling experience for people who got deep into the game, because it required you to cooperate with so many different people, and there was so much depth and lore to the game to explore, and so many challenges to overcome. And I think you have enough of that when you get to World of Warcraft, at least say classic WoW, classic maybe up through Wrath of the Lich King, those first, classic and the first two expansions, which were a really great experience. But by the time you get to Wrath of the Lich King, you have more modern philosophies of game design creeping in, that you need to have, quote, quality of life improvements, that the game needs to be easier to access. The game needs to feel like you are getting more done more quickly. It needs to feel like there's a lot more, say, gradation of difficulty. Like you had 10-man raids and 25-man raids at that point. Of course, in vanilla, you didn't have that. You had 40-man raids, and that was one difficulty. That was like the highest level of difficulty that you could do it. But that classic approach to MMOs is what made them really addictive and really fun, and not just for the hardcore raiders. I think for people who are really nostalgic for classic WoW, we tend to focus a lot on the in-game and that level 60 experience from classic. And you could look at this for like EverQuest Project 1999 or something like that. You can look at it from that angle as well. People tend to get very nostalgic for what they remember from the in-game when they were already deep into the game and they were really enjoying and really invested in every minute of it. Well, the truth is that most of the time that you spent playing those games, you were like a casual noob just logging in maybe a couple times a week to level up. And it took you a long time to level up. Most people that I knew, it took them 6 months to level up their first character, maybe even longer, depending on how serious they were. So most of the experience for the casual player, like most players didn't really experience in-game. Their experience was this long leveling process where were constantly being reinforced with increasing strength through gaining levels and gaining little pieces of gear and stuff like that before they got to like the in-game gear grind. But after that period, really starting in the 2010s, you get this change in philosophy for MMOs where they really are all about getting the player as quickly onto the current thing as you get them on there as quickly as possible and keep them on the current thing. So the gear treadmill is just on hyper mode. You can buy a level boost for your character and then boom, you're at in-game. You don't have to worry about leveling up. You can play with your friends in in-game and you can do all the current content that everybody's streaming. And I feel like maybe the, Twitch and just streaming games in general affected this a little bit, because what you see is an advanced player doing advanced, doing whether it's PvP or it's like a high level raid. And so that needs to be the focus of what you're doing. At the same time, you reduce any friction there is towards getting to that. It's like you have a dungeon finder. So the game quickly loses this feeling of it being an MMO, it being a world. And so circling back around to Lord of the Rings and Lord of the Rings Online and this canceled MMO, do you feel like you would get an immersive Middle-earth experience, or you would get a modern experience that was built around sanding off all the corners and getting you into, say, dungeons and whatever repeatable content is going to keep you on that treadmill? That's what I believe you would have gotten. Were you really expecting like a classic MMO experience that would suck you into the world and make you feel like you're living a second life in Middle Earth? I don't think that's a good expectation, right? If you have a modern company making a modern game, they're going to be influenced by modern game design. And most companies are not going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars or, it can cost a lot. Let's say $100 million to make an MMO. That's like a Hollywood movie budget, if they're going to invest that money, they want to feel like they're going to get a return. And so designing a game that's just a fun place to go to casually is not really going to be that. You need to get something where everybody's hooked and everybody's wanting to buy consumables, maybe from the cash shop, or buy level boosts to play with their friends. You're going to want to create the atmosphere that you had with World of Warcraft in the 2010s, say before its really big decline, starting in the mid 2010s. And so I'm reminded of this video that I made at this point 10 years ago called My Declining Interest in Games. And my conclusion there, lots of people were like, oh, you just got older, that's why you don't like games. Like, man, now that I have my kids and I could game with my kids, it's like, no, like gaming's really fun. Playing games are really fun. They never stop being fun. The reason I lost interest in them is that they got worse, right? World of Warcraft had gotten significantly worse by the mid 2010s after Mists of Pandaria, going into like the promise of Warlords of Draenor that just really fizzled out. So many different experiences. You would have like the new God of War, which was watered down compared to like the original God of War trilogy. You'd have just all of these games kind of being stripped away from a deep experience and into a shallow, very repeatable experience. The Diabloification the Diablo 3ification of so many different games as service, without them having any kind of permanence or depth. So the opposite of a classic MMO where there's a world and you get to go explore it and it's up to you. And instead turning into a thing where like there's content and you need to access and see the content, and you need to do the content at one difficulty level and another difficulty level and another difficulty level. So if you don't like that modern design, which when I get down to it, I don't really talk to anyone who actually likes the modern design. They put up with things in the modern design because there are things about it that they still like. But compared to how they felt, if they're old like me, compared to how they felt about a game in 2006, it's no comparison. It was more fun in 2006. It's not just because you got older. It's because the games changed and they got worse. And that's the thing that I learned when they, going back and playing on classic servers before Blizzard Classic, and then playing Blizzard Classic again. It's like, no, the game was better back then. Like, it was a better game. And I've talked to EverQuest players that basically said the same thing. I played EverQuest a little bit, back in the day. I was never deep into it the way, so I never got to level cap or anything. But they're like, oh yeah, I was a lot better earlier in the game for kind of the same reason. As they release the expansions, it starts to be more focused on like this in-game experience and less of a holistic experience. And that's a pity, because Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, you would think that as a holistic experience, that would be so ripe to do something good. But I have no confidence in Amazon doing that. So for this, Amazon canceling the project, it's like, thank God that we're not going to have to see that, because are they gonna keep it true, or are they gonna woke it up? It's going to be a combination of vandalism of Tolkien's work plus bad modern game design. Modern MMOs really don't hold my interest very much because of that feeling of a treadmill, and the kind of linearity of it all these days. But anyway, leave me your thoughts down below. I'd love to know what you happen to think about modern MMOs and the cancellation of this game. I feel like Lord of the Rings is very firmly moved into an extended milking phase. They're making a Hunt for Gollum movie, apparently, written by Stephen Colbert. All these things. We're in a long milking phase for that, and that's just a really sad place for any franchise to be. If you're from the outside of it and you understand how these cycles work, it's a sad place to be a fan for Lord of the Rings at this point in time. But anyway, leave me your thoughts. I'd love to read them. Let me know what you think, and especially if you played Lord of the Rings online. How is it going? How's it going these days? All right, I'll see you next time.